Welcome to this webinar about long-duration energy storage beyond lithium, the case for long-duration energy storage in Europe. My name is Edwin Koot, and I have two ladies who are going to speak today and explain you more about the potential, the regulation, and more aspects of long-duration energy storage. I'm very happy to touch on this topic, which is strategically very important, I think, for the future of renewable energy. So let's get started, and let me take you through some of the initial slides to explain what we're going to do today. Let me see if I get to the next slide. Yes. So my name is Edwin Koot. I'm the CEO and founder of Solarplaza. Maybe some of you will know. I will explain a little bit more. And we have presentations today by Cruz. She is working at the Energy Source Europe Association, and Oonagh Grady, Vice President, International Origination of HydroStore. We'll have the presentation. We'll have time for Q&A after the presentations. But in the meantime, you can also post your questions through our webinar services and the tools that we'll explain in a bit. I'm going to go to the next slide. Yeah, about Solarplaza, a company I founded in 2004. Actually, I'm in the solar industry since 1994. That is really a long time ago. I feel like a dinosaur here. But since 2004, we have been organizing events around the globe, literally from Chile to Japan, Australia to Sweden. More than 250 right now, counting 51 countries. And this year, we're going to do 26 events. More about that you can find on our website, solarplaza.com. Then let me go to the next slide. Yeah, there is a way for you to participate in this webinar through our question box, and you can find that in the menu. You can send in these questions during the presentations. We will collect them. We'll try to answer them with the speakers after their presentation, and we can also save some questions for the end of the webinar. You can also use this chat box for technical issues. And my colleague Victor is here in the room. You don't see him, but he's working hard on the back end to make all this webinar a success. So we'll go to the next slide. Beyond these practical notes, first we'll have Cruz. He's consultant at the Energy Storage Europe Association. An expert for already more than a couple of years, working as a policy architect, a strategic advisor, focusing on the removing regulatory and investment barriers and to ensure energy systems remain stable and controllable under stress. That sounds like a nice under stress. We're not stressed at all today. Karina, welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Edwin. You really flatter me with this introduction. And thank you, Solarplaza, for the invitation. So what I aim, thank you. What I aim with the presentation today is to give you a future outlook on how the electricity market design is handling long duration energy storage. Although I would love to talk about that piece of legislation, I do not have enough time. I would need the whole morning, but there are specific things that I think would be important for the people listening for long duration energy storage. They are recent policy developments and how they are supporting the deployment of these technologies. For this, I would like to focus on 4 core questions. So where does LDES fit in Europe's current power system? How the EU market design affects investment, what is currently changing, because the European Commission has been working hard recently, but what are still barriers to deployment. So I'm going to focus on system need, market design, and investment decision. Let's look first at the energy landscape. So the starting point is the transformation of the power system. Europe is targeting at least 69% of renewables by 2030. This means that a lot of wind and solar capacity will be installed by then. What does this mean? It means that we are moving towards a system with very low marginal costs, but very high variability and uncertainty. So where does LDES stand today and against this backdrop? Deployment in Europe is dominated by pump hydro, which you can see in the table on the left side of the slide. And then there are a few emerging technologies such as thermal energy storage and compressed air energy storage. we are seeing early policy signs that are supporting these technologies. For example, 2024, which was not so long ago, a compressed air energy storage project secured a capacity market contract in Ireland. This was a first, and it paved the way for what is happening these days. We are also seeing new tailored support schemes, especially in Great Britain. Looking forward and post the 2030 scenario, which is what I showed you in the previous slide, as the system becomes more dependent on intermittency or intermittent generation, the need for long duration energy storage naturally will increase. So the system need is clear and the deployment is scaling. But, and in the next slide, which is showing already, how is LDES getting paid, or how is energy storage in general getting paid? I would like to identify, for the purpose of the presentation, 3 revenue streams: adequacy, stability, and flexibility. For adequacy, I would like to highlight capacity markets. These provide payments for availability during scarcity events, but today they do not value duration, only capacity in megawatts. This creates an issue, meaning that LDES provides energy over time, but is remunerated instantaneously. Derating is also a critical issue here and significantly impacts revenues depending on assumptions. But let's look at stability and system services. I will go deeper down the line, but I would just like to point out that with the revision of network codes, we are moving from a traditional frequency products to a broader set of system stability services. What are they? They are grid forming capabilities, fast frequency response, inertia, voltage support, and this is a positive development. We can say that this is a win, but they are not harmonized and they are not fully scaled. Looking at flexibility, or what I like to call energy markets, these include arbitrage, balancing, and congestion management, but these are still quite volatile, uncertain, and still dependent on market conditions. Looking at adequacy, I would like to go deeper into the capacity markets. Let's look back a little bit in the past. So historically, they were slow to approve, they were fragmented, and they often were not designed with storage in mind. But now, these capacity markets are considered a tool like the others. They are not like a last resort, as historically speaking, as I mentioned. They are more standardized across the EU, and they actually are assessing better the energy storage contributions and specifically of longer duration. How do they work? There are competitive auctions, which is euro per megawatt, long-term contracts, which are related to CapEx. Revenue stacking is allowed, which is very important for the economics of these technologies, and coordination of flexibility schemes. So what is the impact of these? The capacity markets are rolling out way faster, they are more tailored to storage, and there's better transparency for investors. In parallel, and although it is not here in the slide, I would just like to point out that a couple of days ago, Acer issued a recommendation for the European Resource Adequacy Assessment to improve modeling. I will not go into the nitty-gritty, but what I would just like to point out here is that right now, as of a couple of days ago, there will be better representation of adequacy risks, inclusion of storage revenues, and outputs directly usable for capacity market design, such as volumes and derating factors. These are all very positive, but I would just like to point out, and that's in the bottom box, capacity markets are still designed around megawatts and not megawatt hours. And for LDES, values are in duration and sustained delivery. So if it is not captured, LDES is undervalued and shorter duration assets are favored. Derating methodologies are very critical because if they are not designed, they can significantly reduce revenues. Looking at stability services. So there's a big table with a lot of information on the right side, but it's just to show you how member states across the EU are considering these services. So on stability, the system is moving from synchronous generation to inverter-based resources, which are, for example, renewables and energy storage. This creates needs for inertia, fast frequency response, grid farming capabilities, and LDES can provide these services. I would just like to point out that these markets are evolving. Procurement is often national or local, and volumes remain limited. So from an investment perspective, these revenues are short-term, uncertain, and sometimes not very stable. So they improve project economics, but they do not improve bankability. Again, I mentioned these services a couple of minutes ago. This is still a win. So grid farming capabilities will soon be recognized. Fast frequency response and inertia will also be recognized. Voltage and local congestion management will also be recognized. So we do have a positive view on what the future holds. On flexibility needs assessment, this is a table that we used for a briefing on the electricity market design, which was reviewed in June 2024. This is a key development because it introduces an EU-wide framework where member states assess flexibility needs every 2 years over a 5 to 10 year horizon. So save the date because in July 2026, it's when this process is going to start, meaning that TSOs and DSOs are doing an analysis, which will be aggregated at EU level by ACER and will be integrated into the TYNDP. This is important because it formally recognizes flexibility as a distinct system need, but the key limitation is, okay, FNA, so flexibility needs assessment, identify needs, but does not create revenues. So the critical question becomes, okay, how are these needs translated into actual support mechanisms? And this is where CHISAF comes out. CHISAF stands for the Clean Industrial Deal State Aid Framework. It came out June 2025. This is more than flexibility needs assessment because this is already a full toolbox available that member states can use for flexibility support schemes, capacity mechanisms, investment aid, de-risking instruments, and the innovation fund. So just to make the connection, flexibility needs assessment means member states will say, listen, I need this amount of storage, this amount of flexibility, and if this is not possible, these instruments supported by CHISAF, the Clean Industrial Deal State Aid Framework, can be integrated to support the deployment of these technologies. So the issue is not the absence of instruments, but maybe how they are implemented at member state level. Okay, so these are all very positive developments. However, something that I would like to point out for this presentation are non-technology costs. Again, I'm speaking from a very much policy perspective. We are based in Brussels, so this is the context that I have. There are still main issues on taxation, grid fees, and permitting. On taxation, there's a guidance to reduce double taxation. It's from 2022, but it's still not put into place. Double charging is still a problem. It's not so widespread in member states with, for example, the exception of Spain, but there's a clear distinction between synchronous combined cycle gas or fuels and renewables. So right now, one of the main issues that storage is facing is it's being taxed to put energy in and it's being taxed to put energy out, which is not very positive or not even very attractive for investments. For grid fees, tariffs are still not aligned with time and location, and double charging is also an issue in this matter. Then there's permitting and grid access. Although this will improve in the future, but there are still, so for example, batteries and long duration energy storage are being considered differently. So for example, BESS can have fast tracking processes, which LDES is currently not benefiting. So on taxation, as I was saying before, there's a new energy taxation directive, which is not so new because it's stuck in 2022, but the European Commission also put out a recommendation quite recently on how this should be handled. So it is recommending member states to reduce levies and taxes on electricity, which can improve arbitrage, to shift away from these taxes, so to lessen the burdens for electricity vis-a-vis fossil fuels, and then ending this double taxation issue. Again, as I was saying earlier, these are recommendations. It's not binding, so it is up to the member states to see to what extent they are implementing this. But nevertheless, I would like to say that this is an improvement. On grids, with the European grids package came out a couple of months ago, and it's, I think I went one step forward. Okay. Permitting. So under the grids package, there's a guidance on permitting, meaning that historically speaking, energy storage projects were taking a long time to actually reach the finish line. But with this new guidance, which is actually reviewing the Renewable Energy Directive, is legally binding. So member states actually have to implement this. So it will cut down the permitting process for storage to less than 6 months, and for pump hydro for less than 2 years. It will implement fast track for small solar co-located with storage. It will simplify hybridization, and it will streamline environmental assessments. Just in light of an example, I'm from Portugal, and in Portugal, there's this beer company, which is called Heineken, which I think a lot of people know of that. They have this combined cycle plant, which is supporting their operation, but they introduced a thermal energy storage to fast track the processes. And an environmental assessment had to be carried out, which took quite some time to actually finalize this project. And these are issues that will soon be solved with this guidance on permitting. On grid connections, also under the grids package, there is some developments that we would like to highlight, which is moving beyond first come, first served to first ready, first served. So the cowboys are going to be out of the game. There's also a provision of flexible connection agreements, meaning that non-firm access in connected areas will promote earlier deployment. And then hosting capacity transparency, so transmission system operators and distribution system operators maps across all voltage levels, which will reduce siting risk and development uncertainty. Again, this is all non-legislative, so it's not legally binding, but it's still very positive for the business case for long duration energy storage. These are some recommendations facing the issues that I pointed out. Again, these are technologies that are considered strategic. They are growing in Europe, especially considering the political developments that we see in Brussels with industry decarbonization. Industry is complaining about high energy prices, and the Commission is listening, so they are putting instruments that will aid them bring prices down and also help them decarbonize their processes, in which energy storage was considered under this, for example, in the Clean Industrial Deal and the Clean Industrial Deal State Aid Framework. But there are still some things that need to be narrowed down. This is why Energy Storage Europe, with the help of its members, one of them is here, HydroStore, we created a policy paper which helps member states navigate better ways to deploy these technologies in Europe. They go from very market interventionist to not market interventionists at all. And we call this a menu because these are several items that policymakers can pick and choose to implement these recommendations. there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but I would like to finish off with the main asset Energy Storage Europe is calling, which is establishing robust long-duration energy storage modeling and needs assessments. So this is related to the adequacy that I was mentioning in the beginning of this presentation, expand and reform ancillary and stability markets. So the stability markets that I was mentioning to you on the second part of this presentation, promote and reform capacity markets to fully recognize duration, and last but not least, deploying instruments for high capacity projects. Thank you very much for listening to me. In the next slide, when it passes, there's a QR code in case you want to read our policy paper. And I would like to hear what Oonagh has to say on the projects that are growing.
Thank you, Carolina, for a wonderful presentation with a lot of insights. There's a lot of information. I guess people will be very interested to download your policy paper. Just a question from my side. So the picture you're drawing, and I'm trying to zoom out here, is like we cannot expect that this in the market model, right? So is it so much government dependent, or is this market going to grow by itself, even if the government is not going to change anything?
That's the million-euro question, right? So I would like to start off by saying something positive. Policymakers are recognizing more and more the strategic relevance of these technologies. And again, if we want to achieve the Green Deal targets, if we want to scale up renewables, solar and wind, they need energy storage to support them. So sooner rather than later, I'm quite convinced that... Can you hear me?
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, all good.
Thank you. So sooner rather than later, I do feel like this is a top-down approach. In Brussels, these are being more recognized, which eventually member states will also lead to this realization.
Yeah, good. I have some more questions, but I'll save them for the presentation of our next speaker, and that is Oonagh Grady. And where is, let me see if I can get the slide up. Yeah. Is it coming? Yeah, there is Oonagh. Yeah, there you are. There's a slight delay in the connection. Oonagh Grady, Vice President, International Ordination at Hydrostore. She's going to explain a little bit more about the company. She's a strategic relationship builder, an expert leading multidisciplinary teams and coordinating activities across the entire energy value chain. Oonagh, welcome. Can you hear me?
I can, Edwin. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today and to talk about my favorite topic, which is long duration energy storage.
Great. It's a pleasure to have you, Oonagh. And I would say the floor is yours, and you can also take control of the slides.
Brilliant. Thank you. Perfect. Well, as I said, thank you to Solarplaza for the opportunity today. I'm delighted to be speaking on a panel with Carolina, who I have had numerous chats about LDES, and particularly LDES in Europe over the last year in particular. I am going to focus my presentation on, I suppose, drawing from Hydrostore's corporate story, its technology proving journey, and our advanced developments in what I would say are leading LDES markets of California and Australia, to very much bring to life key considerations of stakeholders like grid and system owners, as well as investors and financiers, as to how we can really start to deploy LDES on a wider scale in Europe, drawing on that knowledge and experience that we have gained from those other markets like California and Australia. Apologies, I am having a moment with the technology. Perfect. Hopefully those slides are working, but it will continue in the interim. Hydrostore is a long duration energy storage technology company at its core. We recognized early that first of a kind technologies requires us to very much develop and develop our own developments in the first instance to really prove out those developments and the technology itself. We are based and headquartered in Toronto, in Canada, but we do have offices in Australia, in Melbourne, and also in Denver in North America, and now here in Europe. We do have a portfolio of projects. As I said, we have been along a journey of proving our technology, and I'll maybe speak to that later. But we do have an operational plant in Goderich, which has been operational for 5 years now. We do have 2 advanced projects at scale. In Australia, we have Silver City, which is a 200 megawatt 8-hour project. And in California, we have Willow Rock, which is a 500 megawatt 8-hour project, both looking to advance towards financial investment decision in 2026. But quickly following up behind that, we have a 7 gigawatt pipeline across a number of countries, including additional developments in the United States, Australia, Canada, and also early development works here in Europe. We are, and I think critical to our corporate story is, we are backed by a number of strategic infrastructure investors, the likes of Goldman Sachs, CPP, Canadian Pension Plan Investments, and more recently, the Canadian Growth Fund and Export Canada. To date, we have raised over 500 million USD, and that has very much facilitated us placing our bets in those key LDES advanced markets and undertaking development works to well place us on our journey towards financial investment decision this year. We have also had a number of recent strategic partner announcements as we move into that very much execution phase. We have deepened our relationship with Baker Hughes. They have come on as a strategic technology partner while also making an equity investment into the company. And that will mean that the Baker Hughes equipment will be deployed across our 2 most advanced projects. In addition to that, we have signed a strategic execution partnership and again an equity investment with Hatch, who will be alongside us as we develop out our Willow Rock project in California as our ECP partner. Apologies, I am struggling to move the slides on. Please bear with me 1 second. Perfect. So I think we're on the right slide now. Just with regards to our technology itself, our technology is based on traditional compressed air. We have, however, made a number of advancements. So in the first instance, by including a hydrostatic compensator, and in simple terms, that is a small reservoir, we have been able to build in hard rock as opposed to salt caverns. The benefit of that is that we are able to flexibly site our system where the system needs it, which is very important to system planners and grid operators to be able to provide them that optionality against maybe technologies that do have a more stringent siting constraint, be that topography, etc. In addition to that, we also are a fossil fuel-free solution. So by developing our own thermal storage management technology, we have been able to remove fossil fuel from the process, meaning that we are a dispatchable fossil fuel-free asset, which is also capable of providing system services like synchronous compensation, inertia, as well as many more like black start, etc., offering more than just bulk storage across the system. One other key point for, I think, also the business case discussion is with regards to our asset life. So we are very similar to assets like pumped hydro. Once we are on the system, we are on the system for 50+ years, meaning that we are a long-term investment, but bringing long-term benefits and value to the system at the same time.
Oonagh, if you have trouble with the slides, you can also signal us, and then we will forward to the next slide.
Thank you, Edwin. With regards to the position of A-CAES, I think it's very important to kind of illustrate here on the left of the slide that A-CAES is a long duration asset. So it is, sweet spot is probably 8 to 16 to 24 hours. And it is also at bulk scale. So it is over the 500 megawatts of deployment would be our standard deployment. Obviously, that can be added on unit by unit. That really brings a unique positioning within the market, akin to pumped hydro, but obviously looking at that more intraday than lithium-ion batteries, and would fit similarly to LDES, liquid air energy storage, and CO2 batteries, but maybe at a higher level of capacity deployment. With regards to round trip efficiency, and again, I think really relevant to the business case and to financeability and bankability, we have improved the round trip efficiency against traditional compressed air energy storage. And that 60% represents, I suppose, from a tier one, bankable tier one OEM supplier kit directly off the shelf. We have made no tweaks or amendments to it. And for the first number of projects, it is about balancing that bankability versus an increase in round trip efficiency. But there is certainly potential for end deployments to move up that RTE scale by making tweaks to those standard off-the-shelf pieces of kit. I am going to maybe rely on Edwin to help me with moving the slide. Perfect, thank you. With regards to, I suppose, our technology journey, started as all technology companies do, with pilot projects in Toronto Island. But our first commercial project was Godrich, and Godrich is I think 1.75 megawatt project in Ontario, in Canada, in our home state. It is commercially contracted to the ISO, the grid system operator there, under a capacity agreement, and has been operating now for 5 years. The key point with regards to Godrich is that it provides performance data for our thermal management system, which is our proprietary element of the integrated solution. And that is really important for building credibility with regards to technology readiness, and also financeability and bankability. Just moving on to the next slide. And then I suppose, then after Godrich became operational and was operational for a couple of years, that's when we received quite a lot of our funding, in particular from Goldman Sachs and Canadian Pension Plan. And what that support and funding allowed us to do was look for markets where commercial pathways specifically for long duration energy storage were evolving. And in particular, New South Wales in Australia was and still is one of the world leaders with regards to specific procurement of long duration energy storage. The first thing they did was noted that what their system need was, and that system need really reflected that it was 8+ hours of duration that the system needed. And they designed the LTES program to procure long duration energy storage. They designed that program that it identified the capacity needed out to 2034, and they announced and gave signals through these announcements to investors in long duration energy storage that they would run procurement schemes over that period and how much volume they were going to do. That very much gave investors like Hydrostore the ability to take those early steps in development, to be ready for those procurement processes and to compete on that basis. Without that signal and visibility, it would have been quite difficult for technologies and companies like Hydrostore to take those initial steps. In addition to that, to support those initial steps, ARENA would have provided support in the way of a grant of $45 million to support those early steps in that requirement as well. To be clear, the LTES contract is a revenue certainty contract. So it ensures for our investors and our financiers of our project that there is a clear route to a certainty for revenue streams over that period. With regards to revenue stacking, which is really important in the business case of long duration energy storage, and a really important point about our Silver City project in Australia is that it was also able to secure a reliability contract from Transgrid, which is one of our revenue streams for the project. And the reason that reliability contract was awarded was that our asset is actually placed on a very weak part of the system where there has been numerous outages and where towns have been cut off for 1 to 2 periods due to unforeseen weather circumstances. And what has happened in that scenario is instead of Transgrid investing in new transmission build out, it has basically identified our project as bringing that system benefit to that area. So in reality, it is a grid deferral project also. Just moving to the next slide. And to maybe draw some experience from our Willow Rock project. Our Willow Rock project is based in California. California, again, one of those leading long duration energy storage markets. And through system adequacy calculations, the Californian government identified that long duration energy storage, again identifying it as 8+ hours, was needed on the system. And they mandated that utilities within California took on the responsibility of procuring long duration energy storage through PPA mechanisms. So our project in California is 500 megawatts, 8-hour project. Currently, we have 250 megawatts of that 500 contracted with local utilities, 3CE and CC Power, the most recent being that 50 megawatt contract with CC Power. And these are some of the largest storage offtake contracts in the world because of the scale and the duration of those contracts as well. With regards to the remaining 250 megawatts, we are shortlisted for the balance of the offtake. But in addition to that, the Californian government has also just over the last few weeks announced additional central procurement volumes to be tendered and procured over the next 6 months. The other point with regards to the Willow Rock project is this is, I suppose, our reference case design. So we feel 500 megawatts, 8+ hours is very much the reference case that we will look to deploy in other European jurisdictions. So just moving on to the next slide. And I think this is very much, as you can see, myself and Carolina are very much talking off the same script, but behind that script is many months of identifying what is really needed here in Europe to move into that investment and deployment stage for at-scale long duration energy storage. And learning from the other markets, I think there's three key callouts that I would make. The first is that system operators need to look and to model what their system need is. So is it 8 hours, is it 10 hours, is it 12 hours? It will be very much bespoke to each of the systems. The second is that it is very much those signals that drive investment. So identifying how much is needed, when it will be procured, and what level of readiness those projects need to be at. And finally, for investors, for financiers, and for developers like Hydrostore, it is about having a long-term revenue certainty contract. In Europe, we see 10 to 12 years as the standard. Just to be clear, in California and in Australia, and even in the UK under the cap and floor scheme, that has now pushed to 20 to 25 years. And in New South Wales, even 40 years for long duration energy storage assets like pumped hydro. So what we really require is a sequence framework to procure LDES in Europe, but with those three steps being a very good pathway to getting that investment moving and going for deployment at scale. And just to say thank you very much, and thank you for bearing with me as I maneuvered the mouse.
Thank you, Oonagh. Very insightful, interesting presentation as well. I was looking into Australia and California seem to be the front-running markets in the world, right? Or are there other markets where LDES is taking a faster move?
I think they who move first probably move fastest. So certainly California and Australia, in particularly maybe New South Wales as a state in Australia, but we are seeing Southern Australia and other states move in a similar vein now. In addition to that, we are also seeing North America, specific states in North America, the likes of Arizona, the likes of Virginia, etc. And I think it's fair to say here in Europe, we're starting to see the seedlings, you know, on policy development and designing of schemes. We have seen the MASI scheme in Italy, the long duration energy storage scheme initial procurement in Ireland. And we are seeing movement in Germany with regards to a 2 gigawatt technology agnostic scheme also. What I would say is that in Europe, we haven't necessarily seen the shift to those longer durations yet of that 8+ hours, albeit I think all of those schemes have noted that the duration will increase over time.
Yeah. Thanks, Oonagh, and Carolina, if you're still there, feel free to join. And I have a couple of questions, and also to the audience, if you have questions, you can send them in through the app, to the chat box that is in the menu. I was just wondering, we were discussing like the front-running markets, and Oonagh was saying Italy, Ireland, Germany. What is your perspective, Carolina? Where do you think we will see the first movements on LDES in Europe?
I mean, I just reiterate what Oonagh is saying. The UK is a great example because it's a big island, right? So they do need some sort of backup. Ireland, as Oonagh was saying, and then other emerging markets also, besides long duration energy storage, we're seeing a growth again in Germany, but also in Poland. So hopefully in south of Europe as well, Portugal and Spain, they are very renewable dependent, but they do not have this notion yet.
Yeah, and if you think more out, think more, zoom out, who's in the driver's seat here? Is it the government that needs to initiate and push the utilities like in California? Or is it the TSOs, the system operators that need to take the initiative, the long-term planning? So who actually needs to make the first moves to boost this market for LDES? Oonagh, what is your perspective? And then I'll come to you, Carolina.
Yeah, I think Carolina would have called it out within her presentation. The flexibility needs assessment is very much the starting point here. So system operators undertaking that flexibility needs assessment identifying that there are asset classes like long duration energy storage, which can be fossil fuel free and provide long durations, but also provide additional system benefits. I think that is the first step. I think the second step for that is around that revenue certainty. So I think it's very fair to say here in Europe, but all other markets as well, at this present time, doesn't necessarily fully value all of the benefits that long duration energy storage assets can bring to the system. And therefore, there are amendments required to the markets to develop out that revenue stack for long duration energy storage assets to make them bankable and financeable. And I think the third point I would make is that also you do have to bring in the long lead and the capital intensive nature of some of these assets as well, meaning that it does need to be a movement from the short duration contracts of 10 to 15 years that we traditionally see in Europe. But on the flip side of that, you are getting, in some asset cases, 50+ years of benefit on the system. So it's very much looking at the benefit and cost simultaneously together.
All right, Carolina, anything to add to that?
No, Oonagh captured it quite well. First, member states need to recognize what they need so that the system operators can actually model it for the future needs.
Yeah, and how would you say, is there any TSO in Europe that is, a front runner in this perspective on the LDES?
I would probably draw on the example of the UK. I think the UK government, and in particular DES, NESO and Offtake, have worked collaboratively together to maybe follow those steps. So as we all know, the UK is moving to a centrally planned system. So they have identified the need for LDES out to 2035 and out to 2050. They then initially had looked at a scheme of 6+ hours, but they identified that the system needed an average of greater than 8+. So they moved their procurement requirements to 8+ hours. And then they have looked to develop a cap and floor type instrument to provide that revenue certainty. And they have looked at durations of 25 years for that contract also. So I think it's fair to say that the UK have got a lot of things right in what they've designed. I think how we would say what's needed beyond that is maybe certainty that there's going to be multiple procurement rounds and multiple volumes required in each of those rounds to allow developers like ourselves to get projects ready for each of those windows.
But is that because the government in the UK is smarter than in other countries, or more advanced, more ahead? Or is it because the UK run into some barriers because of the huge growth of renewables and that they were facing that and they had to make these new steps? So is it government driven, or is it market driven by the renewables, the growth of renewables?
I can give maybe a short answer, but I would certainly like to hear Carolina's view. I do think they're interconnected now because we are all moving towards high penetration of renewables. All countries in Europe have quite strong renewable targets. So maybe because of offshore wind in the UK, they've had to move that little bit earlier. But I think certainly if you look right across Europe, including Ireland, as that offshore wind in particular starts to come on, the need is greater for longer durations of storage. But in addition to that, sometimes the storage conversation focuses on that bulk kind of balancing. But there is also additional system needs that comes with a renewables-led system, like inertia, synchronous compensation, and black start, etc. Which, if you look at LDES as an umbrella term, it certainly can bring a lot more of those services beyond just that bulk energy storage as well.
Carolina, do you agree, or you have more insight on who was in the driving seat there?
Yeah, Oonagh is right. And as I was saying before, the UK, they are a big island, so that they need to make sure that they are secured. They're not smarter than other governments, but naturally, if you're more interconnected with other countries, it makes it easier for you to sell and buy energy, and it gives you this feeling of security, right? But indeed, Ireland and the UK are the European countries that are the front runners at the moment for this.
Okay. If I zoom out again and I hear this, I see from the BESS market development, which is going very fast. It started with a 1 hour storage, 2 hours, we're moving towards 4 hours. And now here we're talking with the technology of hydro storage, 8 hours plus. But those markets from 1 to 4 hours, this is a very commercial market. You know, there are C&I customers, and I hear the presentation from both of you. It seems to be very focused on the TSO, on government incentives and government planning. Is there a commercial opportunity for long duration energy storage? Carolina, can I start with you?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I think there are two schools for this. A lot of companies will tell you, listen, we can go fully merchant. The market is already supporting these technologies, and there's another school which is saying, okay, these technologies are quite capex incentive, and we would like some support from that side. Also, the revenue streams, like both Oonagh and I were talking in the very beginning of this presentation, some are recognized, but not yet others. For example, Black Start is not yet fully recognized, Inertia. So the moment that these are tapped in, you can go fully merchant. But Oonagh, please red flag anything that I just said.
I think, as you know, I bring it back to LDES is an umbrella term for numerous different technologies, all with bespoke, I suppose, use cases in particular. So most certainly LDES has a role to play in the C&I sphere. I think an interesting case study of how maybe you bring both together, Edwin, both of your kind of points together, is in Ireland, where you have the large energy user connection policy just announced by CRU, the regulator, which requires any large energy user looking to now seek grid connection in Ireland to bring the same volume of generation or storage to the system. So they have become responsible for developing that ecosystem of generation and storage to facilitate their own demand connection. I think that's an interesting way of maybe where larger capital intensive assets like our own in hydrostore could potentially play a role in the C&I environment. And then there are other LDES solutions that could play a different role in that C&I environment. But I do think in essence, these assets are needed by the system operator. They know best what they need those assets to do. And in the first instance, it is for them to identify what they need and to look to procure that in the best way possible. But we are certainly seeing governments put it down to all of the ecosystem players to bring solutions to the table as well.
All right, good. I want to, we're going to go towards the end, but I want to have a final question. Like, fast forward 3 years from now, where do you think we will be with LDES? What would you think we were going to see, Carolina, in the next 3 years?
So I don't have a crystal ball in the office at the moment, but I can make my educated guess. So the first flexibility needs assessment by member states will be put out in July this year. And I think it's not going to be perfect. And they will need to update it every 2 years. So in the third year, let's put it this way, I think member states will assess their flexibility needs better. Also, another thing that I mentioned very much in passant in this conversation is data centers are coming to Europe, and some people say they're not so grid friendly or that they consume a lot of energy, and this inherently will they will call for energy storage to be integrated behind the meter or even front of the meter. So on the policy side, there will be more recognition of these technologies, not only from the Commission, from Brussels, but also from governments, but also from the industry side. Let's put it this way. As industries want to decarbonize and pay less money for their energy bill, but also the consumers and the data centers, these technologies will scale up. What do you think, Oonagh? Did I make a good assumption? Is my crystal ball up to date, or
too conservative, or?
I think the crystal ball is very much working. All I would add to what Carolina has said is, I think given the current geopolitical space we are in, I think there will be a renewed focus on the energy transition. I think we are looking at renewable-led systems across Europe. And I think what will very much come to the fore is the role and alternative that LDES can be to a more fossil fuel dependent backup to those renewables. I think in addition to that, I think the urgency will come back into play, because as I did note, these are long lead time assets in the majority, especially the ones at scale. And as we all know, that the energy system and development works on a 10-year horizon planning. So what we are looking to develop now will look to be deployed in the mid-2030s. And I think that is a really critical point, is that is when our renewable build out will appear, and we need to have those complementary fossil fuel storage assets in place at similar times, or otherwise we will have reliability and security, system security issues occurring in the mid-2030s. So I think the only 2 points I'd add is an emphasis on the energy transition renewed, but also the urgency that would come with that as well.
Yeah, we can say that is the sad backside of the war in the Middle East, is the increased attention for energy independence, and therefore the growth of renewables, and then inevitably that will require LDES to make that transition complete. I would like to thank you very much, Oonagh and Carolina, for your great contributions to this short webinar. Thank you very much for joining and speaking. The presentations and this webinar you can attend again and listen back through our platform. And let me finish with pointing out some of our upcoming events we have in Italy in July, and we'll probably touch upon the topic of LDES, and we'll have in an event coming up in Copenhagen in September. But there's more events. We do 26. You can find them on our website. Thanks again, Carolina. Thank you, Oonagh. Thank you all the attendees for joining in this webinar, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.